Hey GBA fans, it's your friend Choice CJ here, and I am back once again to do Pick'em Crew with my good friend and co-host Gregulator. Say what's up.
Yo, what's going on YouTube? Gregulator here. Hope you're having a fantastic day, simply fantastic. And CJ, it's nice to be back. It's been a long time since, I think just actually last week we did Pick'ems together, so not an incredibly long time, but we had a really action-packed week of the GBA back in week 7, so it's nice to look fondly upon how well we did. Are you excited to see how well we did?
I am, yeah. Let's quickly flash the week 7 results. A lot went as planned here. The games that were picked as clean sweeps all went in the ways that were expected. Lars, Jolt, and Geo were all able to collect W's like everyone thought. The rest of it's kind of wishy-washy. There was the game between the Scissors and the Pelipers, which went in favor of John, actually, aka Pokemon, and not many people were expecting that. The other games were sort of like 50-50, the only exception being you making a pick for Aster versus Mono.
Yeah, I tried to flex there. That didn't work out too well.
Yeah, you did your best confusion strat.
But it's okay. I have some wiggle room for those kinds of picks, and you know what? I think Aster can he can upset some people. I'm pretty confident.
Yeah, and you know I both know Aster personally, and he's definitely a good battler, and he's better than this season has shown. I mean, he did really well in D-League. He dominated for a lot of the season, just kind of slowing up towards the end of the season there. But we'll see. Maybe he can turn it around. Let's transition to looking at the Week 8 games.
Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Sock here. We're back with another week from the Discord Pick'ems. This week, you guys are locking the San Diego Chim Chargers over the Victorian Shadow, the New Orleans Pelipers beating the Detroit Steelwings, the Tampa Bay Luxrays over the Columbus Chew, the Bronx Bearticks over the Milwaukee Bewares, the Philadelphia Scissors over the Borussia Donphan, the Kansas City Jirachiefs over the Montreal Habsols, the Florida Gators over the Melbourne Rodents, and the San Francisco Giants over the San Jose Sharpedos.
And our first one is going to be the Philadelphia Scissors, coached by Chimpact, and his opponent will be the Borussia Donphan, coached by El Scissor. And I have a few notes on this match. In general, Lars' team is very offensive, so it makes his team a little vulnerable to certain threats. The main things that I'm looking at on Chimpact's side are like Belladrum Slurpuff, which, you know, it's always a potential threat if you don't have the right resistances. And then another sneaky setup mon could be DD Scrafty with just dual stab plus like poison jab for taking on Tapu Fini. I think could be pretty nice. I don't think there's any mon that takes the combination of dark plus fighting on Lars' team. On Chimp's side, on Lars' side, there is some good responses to some of the wall breakers that Chimp has. You know, like he likes to rely on things like Bulu to wall break. He brought Abandoned Bulu last week, but things like Kieran Black, Cobalion, Lurantis are all okay at dealing with Bulu. And then for dealing with Nihilego, he's got the Crocodile and the Cobalion for that. So looking pretty decent. And then just in general, because his team doesn't have a lot of fat, it doesn't really care that much about things like Camel and Victini. So based on matchup, I do really favor Lars here. Like, Chimp's been one of my go-tos for pick'ems the entire season, but he's sort of let me down the last 2 weeks. So I'm gonna pick Lars here.
Would you say Chimpact is putting you in a bind?
Yeah, he did bring that earlier. You're right.
Exactly. Yeah, that's an auto L for Chimp. I'm not. That's not excuse. There's no excuse for that. Some of the things that you mentioned, I think, are really prevalent in this matchup in particular. I think there's a lot of pressure on Crocodile and Tapu Fini, and also the Crook. Those 3 mons in particular have a lot of mons on Chimp's side to guard versus, like you mentioned, Nihilego, big enormous threat to Lars' team. Pokemon like Kieran Black get tossed by it. Mega Manectric cannot KO it, I don't believe, under any circumstance. Maybe Hidden Power Ground, but that's not usually something you want to run versus Chimpact anyway. Only because, you know, he's got a lot of other things that you would have to worry about. Also, I feel like just Lars has, despite Lars having all of those burdens on his side of the field, I think the speed factor on Lars' side really does well in this matchup in particular. His fastest Pokemon is the Greninja, which Mega Manectric destroys all of the offensive threats on Lars' team, on Chimp's team, Mega Manectric does very, very well against, mostly due to access to Overheat to bop the Tapu Bulu, hidden by water potentially from Mega Camera. We saw the camera finally come, so maybe now he has to consider bringing it, but overall, like, you know, yeah, I don't know. I feel like the Tapu Bulu is gonna be really nice for Chimp, but I'm gonna go with Lars, like you mentioned. I can't forgive buying Nihilego.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so with that said, let's now look at our second matchup of this week. We're going to be discussing the Montreal Habsols, coached by Aster J, and the Kansas City Jirachiefs, coached by Token Minority's Jolt. You have some...
Yeah, if you haven't noticed, this is my actual lock of the week.
Oh, yes.
But
yeah, so
not for the person you might...
You're feeling bullish on Aster last week. Now you're feeling really bullish on him. So why don't you start us off?
Yeah, definitely. There's a little lizard tugging at my heart, letting me know that not to lose faith in Aster J this week. I really... Aster does a couple things really, really well. He's a lot more loose. I feel like, if you can see, like, even in his recent losses compared to his early ones, he's been picking up steam actually with his building. I feel like it's finally like clicking for him, his team. It might be a little too late for, actually I'm pretty sure it is too late in the season, but yeah, you know, Aster Phoenix himself, you know, the Duel Links player, he's got the heart of the cards on his side. One thing that I like is that the Scolipede is actually going to have a really important job in this matchup. This is a matchup, if one thing about Jolt, he's very, very meticulous about how he approaches things, and so Jolt knows that Aster watched all of his D-League replays and saw how Jolt's strategy for Scolipede against my Celesteela, how that dynamic worked out, and it's kind of the similar bind. Aster's main threats to Jolt are all walled by Celesteela. If you take a look at the Mega Lopunny, that is not very good versus Celesteela. The Scolipede, not very good versus Celesteela. So one of the things Aster can do is lure with that Endeavor set that we saw last time. You know, unlike the Mono Throat Chop, although if Mono Throat Chop shows up, you know, Aster's just a god at this point.
Yeah.
But, you know, laying down spikes, we know Jolt's very adverse versus hazard stack. He doesn't really prioritize removing hazards, so if Scolipede can lay up spikes, lure that Celesteela. I know Jolt's probably aware of it because, you know, it's a strategy he's used, but I feel like that's something that you can't really avoid, because if you give Scolipede too many turns with its dual stab, you could really put a dent in Jolt's team. Like, Bug Stab is very, very good. Especially Swords Dance, Bug Stab, like Endeavor spikes, as like, I don't know, there's a lot of hinging on this matchup in particular, and I think this could be the upset. I know we talk about trap games and like a lot of other teams have failed to capitalize, but I think Aster's a little bit different from guys like Coach Z and Necro, where he's actually gaining momentum throughout the season, even through his losses. So I'm gonna hinge my bets on Aster J on this one.
Yeah, no, it's perfectly fair, and like as you mentioned, I think the possibility of spikes on Scolipede can be a big issue for Jolt, and that just combined with a combination of U-turn and baton pass abuse, just sort of trying to gain momentum on Jolt's naturally defensive team that likes to pivot around, that could definitely wear him down. And there's a few mons in particular that I think could be good versus Jolt. In particular, like Darmanitan is looking like a pretty decent wall breaker. Like, if it's probably going to be wanting to bring a Scarf set just because that's a good failsafe for Celesteela. But even Scarf, it can hit Hydreigon with U-turn, it can pivot out of Arcanine and Seismitoad, and it can bring in appropriate threats for those things. But otherwise, like, Venusaur looks really nice as a defensive option for Jolt if he can sort of play around hazards and play around U-turn and stuff. And if the Darm is weakened or it's removed, or maybe he runs an Akaberry Celesteela, he could always... It's looking like a classic Autotomize Celesteela is looking nice with just like ground coverage and grass coverage for dealing with stuff like Melodic that would otherwise be kind of annoying. I guess Fortress is kind of the main wall to that, but Fortress doesn't really threaten Celesteela anyway. So, I mean, I'm going to disagree with you. Like, I still am going to go in favor of Jolt, but I see where you're coming from.
I mean, Jolt's
Aster's
undefeated, so he deserves the respect.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's now go to game number 3. And this is going to be a fun one. This is between the Florida Gators, coached by Gator, and the Melbourne Rotoms, coached by Cybertron's Aaron Zhang. I guess usually you say it the other way, don't you? Aaron Cybertron
Aaron
Zhang.
Cybertron Zhang.
But
yeah.
Cybertron Aaron Zhang. So I have a few notes on this matchup. There's like, except for 2 Mons, I think Scarf Superior actually looks really nice. Scarf Superior is really good for outspeeding a lot of the Rain Sweepers that Aaron has, but the only issue though with that would be maybe like a AV Kartana, which does survive like a +4 Leaf Storm from full, and obviously Sliggoo with its Sap Super ability can be immune to that. But the thing with that is that Sliggoo hasn't come once this season, so maybe you can sort of discount that a little bit. And Kartana, like, while AV is definitely a very viable set, it seems like Cybertron really favors like substitute Kartana. So who knows? Maybe he won't be bringing that. In terms of dealing with the rain, you always like to bring up the water resist. And I think that's a really key whenever you're going up against a rain team. I look at Azumarill as being pretty decent for dealing with Kingdra. Altaria is pretty decent for Ludicolo, and Leavanny is pretty decent for Swampert. So I am feeling pretty confident with Gator's rain checks. On Aaron's side, Kartana, even though I just said maybe it's pressured to run Assault Vest, it can be pretty dangerous just in general if he wants to run an offensive set. Like maybe except for like Choppleberry Heatran, it looks very good versus the majority of his team. And I like the electric types for Aaron just because they both have water coverage to hit Mamoswine, which allows them to run Hidden Power Ice to hit potential Flygons. So unless the Flygon's scarfed, like, he's going to have difficulty with those electric types. I'm still going to go in favor of Gator, though, in this matchup. What do you think?
Yeah,
Greg?
actually, I think a Pokemon you didn't really touch on was the Floatzel. And I know
yeah, that could be if a Swift Swim
it's a
user,
very,
which would
it's a
be
very
really
prominent
cool.
Swift Swim user. I actually lost to a Floatzel in the GBA D League, and you got to respect the Floatzel. One thing that it does really, really well is break apart the offense. Like we mentioned, Cybertron's water resist himself aren't very good. They're really restricted towards Kartana and Sliggoo, and like you mentioned, Sliggoo's really an unmon. I mean, it's a good mon, don't get me wrong, but Aaron's has not brought it. It's not very good, and I think the what's that Pokemon? The Weasel, yeah. The Buizel can, put a really big dent in offensively on Aaron's team. So I really like the Buizel's matchup in this game. Also, then to know, like you mentioned, the Mamoswine, probably not the best Pokemon to bring, but it can potentially lure both Swampert and Pelipper with the Freeze Dry, so that's something you always got to know. And Azumarill's matchup, even versus Kartana and Ludicolo, is very strong. Like the Sap Sipper Azumarill set could be a really nice tech to help check Ludicolo, which I think Ludicolo is probably the better Rain Sweeper in this matchup, only because the grass switch in, like, it's just overall better. Like, it's not walled by Klefki, it's not checked by some of the other threats. I think Altaria is going to be key, and also like weather control with Klefki I think could be really important too, being able to change the weather immediately. And Sun on Gator's side looks very good once he can eliminate Rain on Aaron's side. So Buzzwole, Thunder Punch, so watch out for that.
Oh, sweet. All right, well, we're gonna have to pull you back in just a moment here. We've got a few more games, starting with the Milwaukee Bewares, coached by Coach Wolfie Glick, and his opponent is the Bronze Beartics, coached by Pokegame MD. And the Bewares picked up a W last week, whereas the Beartics had a tough loss versus a Assault Vest Kyurem, complemented with some paralysis hacks. When you go up against Zygarde teams, you always have to look at what are the best ground resists, and there's probably not a better ground resist than Tangrowth in the game. And it's luckily for Wolfie, he's got more than that, like not necessarily in terms of resists, but in terms of just fat stuff that can deal with Zygarde. Like Reuniclus, Jellicent, Conkeldurr are all just fat enough to take 1,000 arrows potentially, and a kind of cheeky option is Intimidate Masquerain. Because even if it gets hit by, the smackdown effect of 1,000 arrows, it still resists, and then it gets that -1 off. So I'm not thinking that Zygarde's that great in this matchup. I think Wolfie's got a lot of great responses for that. Another cute thing for Wolfie would be to bring back the Z circuitry. Like he brought the Sunny Day set back in week 1. Because Joey's team is a little bit slow naturally, I think just like a Z speed set, maybe like Z Electric Terrain, would be nice, and then just run Energy Ball coverage for hitting Rhydon. and things like that. And I'm not sure what his other electric resists are. Like Whimsicott doesn't really deal with circuitry all the well. Probably you'd have to be hidden power ground for mag. On Joey's side, I don't think that the sub sweepers are going to be all that great this week, but I think there's a chance for Linoon to come again with just Shadow Claw plus Stomping Tantrum coverage. It's just depending on getting the chip damage on Tangrowth. And one mon I think is a very good wall breaker is Heracross. Like, other than Entei, I think that Heracross has the potential to really plow through with just its stabs plus knockoff plus poison jab. And because Wolfie's team is sort of naturally bulky, it is sort of vulnerable to a set like that.
Yeah, no, definitely.
But those are my thoughts.
Actually,
those are my thoughts for this week.
I actually really want to agree with you on that point. I really think normally when you think of Swords Dance variants of Heracross, you potentially think of like as a wall breaking set. However, one thing that I hate about Joey's team is how slow it is. The only team that's out-slowed by Joey is Wolf's team. And so you look at the speed tiers on Wolfie's side, and you know what the second fastest Pokemon is in the matchup? Actually, the third, because there's an Absol. It is Heracross. That's terrifying. Yeah. Especially when your defensive core is Reuniclus, Tangrowth. And those are the Pokemon that Zygarde needs to be eliminated. So I could definitely see Heracross putting in the finest of work in this matchup. Like, Wolfie's traditional checks would include like Jellicent and Florges, but if Joey's packing Facade and, knockoff or some type of dark coverage, Throat Chop, shout out to Aster for that. But oh gosh in the comments for the Throat Chop. But even just like a Life Orb, like not Life Orb, a Flame Orb Heracross, a flaming Heracross can go ahead and put in a ton of work against Wolfie's team and really open the doors for some people, for some of the other mons on Joey's side, like potentially even Mega Gyarados if it wants to like lure the Tangrowth. I think, I'm gonna go with Joey on this one over Wolfie.
Yeah, I'm going in favor of Wolfie just because I trust him a little bit more. But when you point that out, it could be very scary for Wolfie. Kind of remember his name there. All right, we are halfway through the week. Let's now hop into the first of the second half of the matches. That was kind of awkward to say. This is going to be between the San Francisco Giants, coached by Gym Leader Gio, and the San Jose Torpedoes, coached by Tom Z. Two GBA vets duking it out. And it's very interesting because of the nature of Tom's team. I think it's going to force a very different build out of Gio. Like Gio, he kind of likes to use his mons as pivots. Mew, Toxapex, Scizor all like to be pivots. He likes to scout with Ditto and things like that. But I don't think Tom's team really allows for that all that well.
No, it doesn't. Just
because Lando, like by itself, is really nice. Like it's got the Sky Strike for Shaman, Stone Edge for Rotom. Like he doesn't have to bring a setup set to pressure Gio's team just because it's naturally kind of slow and bulky. And then additionally, you have Houndoom, which is looking really nice. And it's true that Gio has Dougie, which could potentially trap Houndoom. But one, I don't think Dougie is super great in the matchup just because besides Houndoom, I don't think it traps much. Like Lando, Rotom all don't care, Scizor doesn't care, Swellow doesn't care, etc. But then Houndoom also has Sucker Punch to blow back a Dougie if he's not careful. I guess it depends on how much chip damage the Dugtrio has and things like that. On terms of offensive mons on Gio's side, like I've kind of been explaining, I don't think defense in bulk is a good option for him here. But on the offensive side, I do like Scizor, just because it's very good to pivot around and get in the right offensive mons, such as Shaman. So like if a Lando or a Rotom wants to come in on a U-turning Scizor, he can go into an offensive Shaman, and the resistances to Seed Flare are not very abundant. You've got easy coverage for things like Como. You can hit it with Dazzling Gleam, and you've got Hidden Power Fire for Scizor. So other than Houndoom, I think that Shaman looks quite threatening.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, CJ. I think Shaman is really the key to breaking down Tom's team. One thing I don't like about Tom's transactions as of late is that he got a bit more weaker to a certain type combination. And you mentioned Dazzling Gleam. I'd argue that Psychic on Shaman is a lot more terrifying. Oh my god, hang on. I need to verify that this Pokemon actually gets Psychic. I'm used to using good Pokemon like Celebi, which, you know, actually gets Psychic. So let me fact check. But regardless,
no, I'm pretty sure you're right. And even
it does get Psychic.
Yeah, and even if not, it could always run Air Slash and it kind of do the same thing that
potentially. I think the benefit to running Psychic though is just the base power, especially because you don't have Stab on Shaman. Like that base power really helps out when dealing with both the Roserade and the Kommo-o, especially. But another thing to mention, I think the Mega Houndoom's once again going to be an immense threat. So even if Dugtrio only gets rid of the Houndoom, like even then, like what does Tom have for the Shaman? Like a Life Orb Shaman, potentially like Healing Wish options from. Actually, Shaman can't Healing Wish itself, but you know, yeah, I just think that getting rid of the Swallow and the Mega Houndoom, which are the only two Pokemon faster than Shaman, that's ridiculous for a Pokemon that has that much coverage. We usually see bulky stuff out of Geo, but just Life Orb, 4 attacks, or Expert Belt. I prefer Life Orb, by the way. But, you know, just an offensive Shaman just goes in on top. Like, you don't even need Hidden Power Ice. You just hit the lander with a Seed Flare and just watch it drop. That's gonna die.
Yeah,
it's
seriously.
It's life. Yeah, if you invest, it will die. I think that, especially like you pressure the Stealth Rock, you get rocks off on Geo's side of the field. You could even realistically consider Sash Dugtrio, which helps versus some of the offensive threats like that Mega Houndoom potentially behind a substitute, or even Sucker Punch Houndoom. Just because I don't see Tom getting a rocks unless it's with Landorus, and if it's with Landorus, he's not Double Dance, I believe, especially because you need a ton of coverage on Tom's side of the field to deal with Geo's team. You need Earthquake, you need a Continental Crush, potentially, you need Stone Edge definitely to hit Rotom Fan, otherwise you're walled. So yeah, I'm going to go with Geo's side of the field. I think Tom's kind of slipped since he beat Mono, and Geo's just somehow always gets better the more the season goes on. So I'm gonna hedge my bets on Geo this week.
Yeah, that's really true about Geo. He does always get better, and he had a tough start to the season, going up against like Chimp and MV, and I think Joey, like all very early on.
Yeah, well, he beat Joey.
He did end up beating him, but like even in the losses versus Chimp and MV, he displayed a lot of good skills. So everyone knows the caliber of player that Geo is. So
yeah,
we'll see if he can show that off again this week versus
Speaking of high caliber players, we'll move on to the 6th match of the week, which is the San Diego Chimchargers taking on the Victorian Shadows. MV versus Necro. Talk about two teams on opposite side of the spectrums here. I think this is a division matchup. We've seen this match before, and it was not pretty the first time, if you can remember.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I don't really expect it to be any different. Tapu Koko just destroys Necro's team, and one of the reasons why is because, you know, electric plus like physical electric versus Necro doesn't have a whole lot for it. His electric resists include Rotom Heat, okay, basic, but like, why would you bring Rotom Heat? It just gives a free opportunity into Hoopa Unbound to just destroy Necro. Like, it just, things just drop. Drain Punch, Gong Shot for the Togekiss, or even electric boosted electric terrain. What's that move? Would you punch with the electricity? Thunder Punch. There we go.
Yeah.
There we go. Diggersby, obviously.
What's the move where you punch with electricity?
Yeah, exactly.
Thunder Punch.
And, you know, Emmy's got some new toys on his side of the field, but with, like, the Amoonguss, the Magmortar, none of those ones matter. I think Koko is just incredible in this matchup. Mega Alakazam, once again, proving to be annoying versus MV, but between Hoopa and Alolan Raichu, potentially, I don't think that'll be too much of an issue. And Alolan Raichu is actually very good versus Hawlucha. Like, you know, I think the only dark move, we keep coming back to this move, is Throat Chop. Throat Chop Hawlucha.
Yeah.
You know, that's the one way to hit the Raichu. So that's a lot of coverage gone from Hawlucha that could potentially be threatening versus MV. So, yeah, MV only lost to Jolt, and Necros, I'm not going to go there. Do you have any last thoughts, CJ?
Yeah, no, I mean, you pretty much summed it up. Like, Hoopa, Tapu Koko, Raichu, all looking like really big threats. Hoopa especially, just because the dark resists are easily hit by other coverage, like T-Tar is hit by fighting coverage, and Togekiss can get hit by stuff like Gung Shot. And you know, there's definitely some offensive threats. Like I think Hawlucha and Lycanroc can both be scary with the weather/terrain up. But that being said, like Envy's got really good fat on his team. Like Empoleon and Gligar are just really good at dealing with those bonds. Not necessarily like in that order, but they're just fat. And then you also have like Slowbro, which is going to be perfect for Hawlucha. Amoonguss is just fat and annoying. I don't think that Necro's got enough to break through. So I think it's in Envy's favor.
I think we can agree on that.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's move on to another match. We have Chase Crimson Seabad taking on John, aka Pokemon of the New Orleans Pelipers. Now, CJ, my dude, what is going on here with this matchup?
Yeah, there's a little to talk about here. I'm trying to look at like ways that Chase can try and pull this out here. You know, like you picked Aster as your upset earlier. What are the ways that Chase could pull an upset here? And like, to be honest, I'm not seeing a lot of good ways, just because a lot of the mons that he has are easily checked by mons on John's team. Like the Cresselia, just in particular, is such a nuisance for Chase's team. Like it checks Infernape, it checks Jirachi, it checks whatever. Donphan can't touch it that well. And then for some of the setup mons that Chase really likes to rely on, like Thundurus, I think Jolteon can pretty comfortably deal with almost any variant of Thundy, even though I guess Thundy does have like Z moves that you can use to hit Jolteon very hard. But just the fact that it outspeeds and is immune to the electric type moves, I think helps it out a ton. The only mon that I think is like kind of cool here for Chase is Jirachi, just because it's a good lure for things like Chomp, Escavalier, and etc. But Jirachi's also extremely pressured by Diancie, so I'm not sure he's going to be able to bring a moveset that has a lot of lure potential. So I don't think that he's going to be able to deal with the bulk that John has overall. It's just going to be too overwhelming.
Yeah, not only that, John's got very safe options to pivot into. Tornadus T just destroys everything that's not Lycanroc. And Lycanroc doesn't come in on Torn T, by the way. And Mega Beedrill just scared that out. But Beedrill's checked really hard by mons like Garchomp, Escavalier, Piloswine to an extent. Like, those are some really thick mons, and if John can keep them healthy, and I trust John to keep those mons healthy, I can really see John just beating down Chase. I think one of the things Chase does have going for him, though, is that offensively, like I keep saying this week in and week out, Chase tends to have a better offensive matchup versus a lot of his opponents. And that's due to the nature of his team. Like Thundurus Eye, Infernape, Mega Beedrill, Jirachi to an extent, all are very difficult mons to prepare for defensively. So a lot of the fat stuff on John's team, like Serena, Tentacruel, Cresselia, I would think twice about bringing them if Chase, especially with the Beedrill around, oh my god, that core just gets destroyed by those three right there, by that Beedrill. So John's got to be careful, but I think it'll be closer than people think, but I'm going to hedge my bets on John.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. Alright, so we've been doing good so far. Let's end on a high note and talk about this last matchup. This is between the Columbus Chew, coached by the mysterious Coach Z, and the Tampa Bay Luxrays, coached by Monotui. Greg, I tried really hard to take some good notes on this matchup, trying to look for plus signs for the Chew, and no offense to Coach Z, I couldn't really find any. I think everything in this matchup is in favor of Mono. He's got good checks for Sand, like the Gliscor. He's got Slowking to deal with like setup variants of Manaphy. He could easily run like Assault Vest with Dragon Tail to take care of that thing. And Guard is like a little tricky, but like if he just runs Chople Berry Registeel, then I think it's pretty much no problem. And then you look at a Pokemon like Zardex, and besides Hippowdon, there's looking like there's a lot of Zardex food on Coach Z's team. So I want Coach Z to break out of his slump, but I don't think it's happening versus Mono.
Neither do I, unfortunately, for Coach Z. I really want to touch because Coach Z has a lot of traditional quote-unquote Zardex checks. Unfortunately, Coach Z, most of them are just walled by Gliscor. Like Hippowdon, not a threat to Gliscor. Weezing, not a threat to Gliscor. He has one more. Excadrill offensively under Sand, not a threat to Gliscor. So as long as he keeps the Gliscor healthy and like that's it. Really, Keldeo also goes in. Like check Sneasel, can beat Porygon 2, beat Hippowdon, which is another threat to, you know, Charizard X. Can check Manaphy. So I just, and Mono's the better player. We've seen throughout the course of the season, Mono's been a bit more detailed in prep. And Coach Z, I've been saying I want to find out your ult, but I'm just done. I hope for your sake no one knows your ult, or if you are an ult. But yeah, a little rude, but alas, it happens when you go 0-7. And it's I just need reasons to pick people. Like at least, you know, some people who are fighting, like Asher, Tom, like they have some fight in them, and their seasons are basically gone for the most part. But like you have to give something. I know there's only 5 weeks left. 8 plus the other 4. But like, just give us something. let's get some good battles. I think if we can get a good showing out of Coach Z, that'll really bring some momentum back. I just want a good showing, but I have to pick Mono. I think most people are.
Yeah, definitely. So, hope you guys enjoyed that analysis as we broke down each matchup. And of course, we'll be back again next week. And in case you don't want to miss our video, I highly recommend you guys subscribe to the GBA channel so you can catch us again next week and catch all the other great analysts as they do their weekly shows. Make sure you sub to all of the coaches down below. You'll be able to find all their links in the description. Greg, what are your closing words for this video today?
I got 2 words for you, CJ. Can you guess what they are?
Go Yanmega.
Yeah, Yanmega. Yanmega's broken. That's what I gotta say.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Oh gosh, that's what I was gonna say. But I hope you guys have a fantastic day. Simply fantastic. Peace out.